Hello friends, I've been given an alternative neck nomination to do something cool to help the world, and so I've decided to make this video informing you why you should give a shit about climate change. I think that apathy is one of the biggest issues confronting our world, and my generation in particular, and so through this video I hope to show you why you should give a shit about climate change by addressing some of the many reasons that I've heard that people choose not to care about this massively important world issue. People will often say climate change is a problem for future generations, that it's not going to affect us in the here and now, and so there's no need to care about it or do anything now. This is turning a blind eye to our experiences here and now. We're already experiencing economic disruptions, and we're already experiencing extreme weather unlike any we've ever seen. The UK is experiencing severe flooding, there's severe cold throughout much of the eastern United States, and California is experiencing what could be its worst drought in 500 years. This is down to climate change and its effects here and now. Furthermore, the New York Times reports from the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change that 15 years of inaction on climate change, so until 2030, could make the problem virtually impossible to solve with current technologies. It could be economically ruinous for not just future generations, but older versions of ourselves to continue ignoring climate change in the here and now. Now, occasionally people will still claim that the science is uncertain. The science behind climate change is, not at consensus and not well understood. And if this were true, then I could accept this as a reason not to care so much about climate change. But the science is not uncertain. Out of 13,950 papers on global climate change published between 1991 and 2012, 24 disagreed that global warming was happening and humans were the cause. That means there's a 99.83% consensus among all peer-reviewed scientists, or among all peer-reviewed articles rather, on the science of global warming. That is not uncertainty. The Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change has released its most recent report, and you can find the summary for policymakers online if you want something short. And you'll excuse me if I just read to you this excerpt from that report. Warming of the climate system is unequivocal, and since the 1950s, many of the observed changes are unprecedented over decades to millennia. The atmosphere and ocean have warmed, the amounts of snow and ice have diminished, sea level has risen, and the concentrations of greenhouse gases have increased. You can read in this report all of their confidence intervals and how confident they are in the evidence that's available. I'll provide a link to that in the footer of this video, but you should know that the science behind climate change is not uncertain. This is happening, it's real, and the science is true. Will often argue that individuals can't make a difference, that there's no point in taking action against climate change when this is a global issue and it can't be solved by individuals. Nothing could be further from the truth. Simply by switching 3 incandescent light bulbs to compact fluorescent bulbs, you can save 300 pounds of carbon dioxide from the atmosphere each year. That's a big impact for an individual. Furthermore, we can't assume that we act in isolation. No one lives in a bubble. Your actions have effect on the actions of others, and what you do reflects on your individual values. So you can set an example for others, and you can encourage politicians to take action as a nation in order to combat the effects of climate change worldwide. Now, often you'll hear people say things like, that's great, I'm sure that climate change is really important, I really do care about the environment, but I can't focus any attention on it because there's so many humanitarian crises to deal with. Unfortunately, this argument is completely missing the mark. Climate change is a humanitarian crisis in itself. Climate change and its effects will impact food security, they'll impact indigenous ways of life, and it's been proven that poor and disadvantaged people are the least able to adapt to the effects of climate change, even though they're the most at risk from its effects. You can ask the people of Kiribati, much of whose nation is about to sink into the sea in the next 50 years. You can ask the Canadian Inuit, who are already recognizing sudden and dramatic changes to their way of life. And you can ask people living in the floodplains of Bangladesh, the coastal United States, and many other places around the world. whose food security and whose livelihood is threatened by rising seas. Climate change truly is a humanitarian crisis, and it is the most important one to address if we intend to develop sustainably into the future. Finally, there's the valid consideration that climate change is difficult to understand, and we might not have time to pursue good sources and find out more about it. And that is why I want to open the discourse with you. So it's not so difficult to identify good sources, it's not so difficult to stick to these sources and get the news as it comes, but I want to help people give a shit about climate change. I want you to ask me if you have any questions. I'm not a climate scientist, but I'm very interested in this issue, and I'm pretty good at finding the right resources. So I've opened a new email address where you can email me any of your questions, concerns, or if you just want to hate on me for giving a shit, you can do that too. So it's climate.giveashit@gmail.com, and I look forward to your emails. I'm not going to open the comments on this video because the road to hell is paved with YouTube comments, but I look forward to your emails and to discussing your questions with you further. Thanks.